So this episode we're going to look at tinkers, and this is a way that you can call a function with an interval in between it, meaning that you can call a function once every second, for example. You can do two different types of tinkers. One are global tinkers and the second one is modifier tinkers. And first off, we're going to look at modifier tinkers, and this is how you should call functions repetitively. If you're doing something with abilities, it must be a modifier tinker because it does a lot of stuff for performance wise apparently, and there's also, it cleans up everything as well for you. It's kind of easier to do it this way as well. So here in our code with our arrow ability, we already had on projectile hit, and we're creating this modifier called test modifier, and it's lasting for, we had last time 5 seconds. So we'll go to our test modifier.lua, and we want to listen into two functions. We want two function listeners called test modifier on created, and we want to go function test modifier on interval tink. And the first function is called once the modifier is created, and the second one is going to be used when we are calling this once every second. It's our interval function. But what we need to make sure that we have within this, that I mentioned briefly at the end of the last episode, was that you need to have if server then if is server then end. If you don't have all of your code in case like this, your modifiers can go out of sync with what's happening on the server, and you'll also get an error in the console. So but it won't show up on like red text on the screen if you don't have this, but it will show it in the console, the purpley kind of color text. So in here we want to go and start our interval thinking. So self, which is the modifier, and we want to go start interval tink, and we want to say how often we want it, which is once every second. We can change this to once every 0.5 seconds or whatever. But what we're going to do here is call, we're going to just write printing out. So we're going to print ticking, and we're going to get the game time, game rules, get game time. Now we'll also use this line, but we're going to change it to uncreated here. So what will happen is we'll print out this when a modifier is created, and then this will get printed once every frame, and we'll write the time beside it. So let's restart our game mode. So now when we hit our arrow, we hit the Sven. I hit him. Good. I thought I missed him. So if we look here at the console, what it ends up saying is uncreated 30.5 seconds, ticking at 31.5 seconds, ticking 32.5 seconds, ticking 33.5 seconds, ticking 34.5 seconds, ticking 35 seconds, and it ticked for a total of 5 seconds. But what you'll notice is that the first tick happens 1 second after it was created. So on that very initial frame where it's created, that ticking function is not getting called. Hypothetically, let's say you want to have an ability that happens also on the very first frame. What you need to just do is go get this function and call self on interval tink. This will also call it when it's created once, and then it will call this once every time the interval is ticking. Now we don't really like this idea of hard coding our value of 1. I'll show you how you can prevent this from being hard coded. What you can do is, if you go back here to your arrow class, and where you were creating a modifier, we had this table, and it was duration of 5 seconds. We can add another value in here called tick rate. We can call it anything we want. We can call it Billy, Johnny, whatever you want to do. And what we'll do is we'll do 0.5 seconds, and we'll go here, and let's say we'll just do damage as well, because we're going to do damage to our enemy, and damage per tick, we'll call it 100, and it's going to tick for a total of 3 seconds now. And we're also going to call it once at the very start of the frame. So the damage per tick, and let's say here what we need to do now is in uncreated we can get the arguments. So we're just going to call our arguments table kv. This contains all the values that are being passed in. So let's say we want to go self, or we want to do the kv dot the interval thing first. So kv.tickRate would be here. Now let's say we want to store this. We can go self.tickRate equals kv.tickRate, and this just stores this value in our modifier class as a property. Now we can also go self.damage per tick equals kv dot damage per tick. Okay, not fic tick. There we go. So now what will happen is that we will go at this tick rate every single time the value that we've passed in, and we need to do an apply damage now. So let's go back to our API, and there's a thing called apply damage. Let's open this up, just get the example here, and we'll paste this in here. So we have victim. So the victim in this case is going to be the parent of this modifier. And how do I know this? How do I know that it's the parent, and where did I get this function? So if we go back to the API here, we go down to here. This is C Dota modifier Lua. This shows you all the functions with the modifier, but it also uses buff. I don't know why the API doesn't say this, but all of these functions here are also available within your modifier as well. So you can do stuff like call destroy, you can get the parent, and if we read what the description of this is, it says get the unit the modifier is parented to. So this modifier's parent will be Sven in this case. So we need to go back to our code now, and the attacker is self get caster, and our damage is going to be self.damage per tick, which is what we stored earlier up here in the onCreated, and we're going to get this value from our modifier. Now the damage type, we might want to get this from the ability. So let's just go up here and write local ability equals self.get ability, and we can go ability get damage. I think it's like get ability damage type, and we can get all the values like this as well, and this is how we can access back to our ability. Now we're not going to deal with flags, and we'll just set the ability here, and both of these are optional, these flags and setting the ability again, and then it's just a passing this damage table into apply damage. And so this now will, as a result, if we do some maths here before we just run this, and we see roughly how much damage it's going to do. So in our arrow ability, we're doing this for 3 seconds. It ticks once every 0.5 seconds, and there's 100 damage per tick. So in total, it's going to tick with the interval 6 times, but we're also calling on interval tick once at the very first frame when it's created, so it ticks 7 times in total, and it does 100 damage each time, so that's a 700 damage. What I haven't said is that the magic damage type, I don't know what this is, but let's say that we want to do magical damage, for example. I don't know what the damage is set for the arrow. Let's have a look at the KV file actually. So units custom, abilities custom. Okay, down here to our damage type, it doesn't say, we haven't specified it, so I think it might just return like none or something like that. So let's see pure. So it'll actually go damage type none because it's not specified. So let's just set it to magical. So this is the constant that needs to be passed in here, because we haven't actually set this as part of our KV file. So we'll just pass in damage magical here. So let's restart our code now. So it's just a good example to show that printing stuff out can be useful, because now when we run it and we see that now Sven is taking 100 damage 7 times over the space of, was it 3 seconds? So that's our ability, but you'll notice that I was saying it was 700 damage that this was going to do. Sven has magical resist of 26%, so he's left over with 150 health in total. And you can use these values for like getting the damage and stuff. This is how like Bloodseeker's Rupture is done, but instead of like ticking once every 0.5 seconds. I think it's once every 0.25 seconds. And then you get the origin position of the hero and you check like the difference of the distance travel between A to B. And that's pretty much how Bloodseeker stuff works and a bunch of other spells. Now, what we want to look at is just global tinkers very quickly. And this is how you can call functions globally. So, or kind of how your game mode would tink, if you want to put it that way, the tinker functions for the game mode. So if we go back here to add-on game mode.lua, and here Valve already have an example for us in the template. So it's going game rules, get game mode entity. So this is the game mode class, and it's calling setTink, and it's using the function. This is a separate function that's similar to what the modifier one was doing, but this is calling one specific function. So it's calling the function onTink. It's passing self, which is this game mode. It's doing a global tink, and I think that's the name of the tinker. So if you want to remove it, you can get that. And then 2 is once every 2 seconds. So if we go down here to Battle Arena on Tink, this is the name of our game mode class, or game, yeah, this is the name of our add-on class, not game mode. And here they have a thing called print template add-on script running, but it's commented out. So it's checking first to see what the game rule state is in, and checking to see if we're in the in progress state, which is by default once we hit 0 seconds. So let's uncomment this and run our code. If we look at our console, we'll end up seeing that this code here is printing out every single time once every 2 seconds. And if we even clear this, it'll keep printing out once every 2 seconds. Now that's just an example of that tinker for the global game mode stuff. But one thing I do want to mention is that if you do want to end the tinker, what you can end up doing, so let's say in your modifier you don't want to destroy the modifier and you just want it to stop thinking. What you need to do is go return -1, and when you return -1 it will end the tinker, and this is like part of the documentation. It says that somewhere. But this is modifiers now in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to see more custom game tutorials, make sure you subscribe.